This video is for exploring transformations and it's the first part of two. On the second part, I'm going to explain or do some examples so you can see how to transform different shapes. Let's go ahead and look at the definition for transformations first of all. Transformations is a change in a position, size, or shape of a figure. So you guys will have something in the coordinate plane, just like the one we have here, and you're going to change that somehow to make a transformation. To do that, we need to know the rules that we saw in the classroom. There's 4 types of transformations, so let's look at each one of them. The first 2 that you guys see here are translation and reflection. So let's talk about translation first. Translation is when you move a point, a figure, a function, right, left, up, or down. So basically it's vertical or horizontal. Those are the 4 options. That's why we have horizontal translation and we have vertical translation. When you make a horizontal translation, that means you go left or right. The x coordinates in a point are going to change. So you're going to change the x coordinates. You're going to add or subtract a number to the value of x. So as you can see here, they give us some point, x, y, and it can be any number. So you're going to take x and you're going to add h or subtract h. H is just a number that is how many units you're going to move horizontally. Now vertical translation, that's when you move up or down, so vertical translation. And when you make a vertical translation, you are going to change the y coordinates. Vertical, just like the y-axis, you will change the y. If you think about horizontal translation, just like the x-axis is horizontal, that's when you change the x. So let's look at vertical translation. They give you a point, x, y here. So the x stays the same, but you're going to change the y. So you're going to add or subtract some number. And we have k for that. Okay, so k is going to be a number, negative or positive. And you are going to change the y coordinates. Now remember that you need to know the vocabulary when they tell you horizontal or vertical translation. So if you know it's horizontal translation, when it's right, you're going to add to the x value. When it's left, it's going to say move 2 to the left. You're going to subtract to the x value. For vertical translation, when it says up, you're going to add a number to the y. When it says down, you're going to subtract a number to the y. So be careful with the words that's given to you. Now let's look at reflection. A reflection flips a point, a figure, or function across a line. So there's a reflection across the y-axis and there's a reflection across the x-axis. So let's look at the reflection across the y. The reflection across the y-axis, that's when you are going to change the sign of the x coordinate, the x value. So look at the point they give us. We have a point x, y, so remember those are going to be numbers. And you change the sign of the x and the y stays the same. Now x can be negative. If you have a negative x, it's going to become positive over here. But right now it's positive, so that's why they changed it to a negative. But you change the sign of the x coordinates when you have a reflection across the y-axis. If you have a reflection across the x-axis, that's when you change the y coordinates. So the x is the same. So we have a point here, x stays the same, but you can change the sign of the y values. So remember, this is negative, you can change it to positive. Right now it's positive, that's why they changed it to a negative. But you change the sign of the y values. And you can think of it like this. If they tell you to reflect across the y-axis, just think of the opposite. Opposite of y is x. that's when you do the opposite of the sign. You change the sign. If they tell you reflection across the x-axis, opposite of x is y, so you change the sign, the opposite sign of the y. We also have two more transformations, which are stretch and compression. So in total 4 transformations that we look at. The first 2 were translation and reflection. So now let's look at stretch and compression. For stretch and compression, there's horizontal stretch and there's vertical stretch. Horizontal compression and vertical compression. So let's look at what they mean. First, when they say horizontal stretch, you are going to change the x coordinates. Horizontal stretch, you change the x. So horizontal is for the x-axis, so you're going to multiply the x value. That value is going to be b. That's why we have a b here. And they say here that the absolute value b is greater than 1. That tells you you are going to have stretch. When the factor is greater than 1, it's going to be stretch. If it's vertical stretch, vertical, you're going to change the y coordinates. So vertical is just like the y-axis, you change the y coordinates. Now look at the value we have on this one. We have the value of a. So when the absolute value of a is greater than 1, that's going to be stretch. Okay? So if it says vertical stretch, you are going to multiply the y values by the factor of a. Vertical stretch. If it says horizontal stretch, you're going to multiply the b value to the x. Now horizontal compression and vertical compression, that's when let's look at horizontal first. So horizontal compression, that's when the b value is between 0 and 1. I like to say it's less than 1. You might have a fraction, might have a decimal, but it's going to be between 0 and 1. Horizontal means compression, means you are going to multiply the x values. You're going to change the x values. So you multiply x by the factor of b. So when the factor is less than 1, it's compression. Y stays the same. And when you have vertical compression, vertical is just like the x-axis, like the y-axis, vertical. So you guys will multiply the y coordinates. And the factor of a, the absolute value of a, has to be between 0 and 1 to be compression. So we have, or less than 1. So you multiply the y values. So whatever the factor is, you multiply the y by that factor. So a times y. A is going to be a number less than 1. X stays the same. So it's just a little review for stretch and compression. First of all, you have to remember when you have stretch, horizontal or vertical, the factor needs to be more than 1, bigger than 1. That's going to be stretch. Then you're going to go into details. If it's horizontal, you multiply the x coordinates. If it's vertical, you multiply the y coordinates. For compression, once you see the word compression, the factor has to be between 0 and 1, or I like to say less than 1. And then you go into details again. If it's horizontal, you multiply the x values. If it's vertical, you multiply the y values. So this video talks about the 4 different transformations that you can do to a function or a point. In the next video, which is part 2, I'm going to show you guys an example of how to do some of the transformation. There's a lot of them, and I'm not going to have time to show you each one of them, but I'm going to give you guys some examples to do stretch, compression, translation, and reflection.